The city of Ravenbrook slept beneath a heavy blanket of mist that night. Streetlights flickered through the haze, their weak glow swallowed by the damp air. Inside a small apartment on the corner of Haversham Avenue, Laura Bennett stirred awake to the faint sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. At first, she thought it was the neighbors again. Loud, careless, drunk. But then came the unmistakable metallic click of a gun being readied. Her pulse sharpened. Before she could rise, a thunderous crash split the night. The front door burst open, splintering into fragments. 3 men in tactical black flooded the room, their flashlights slicing through the dark like daggers. "Hands where we can see them," one of them barked. Laura froze. Her mind raced not with fear, but with analysis. The entry was sloppy. No warrant read, no identification shown, and the lead officer's left boot violated standard positioning protocol. Details like that mattered to her. Always had. She raised her hands slowly, her voice calm. "This is an unlawful entry," she said evenly. "You've just committed your first Fourth Amendment violation." The youngest officer hesitated. "What?" The older one, Detective Callow, snapped back. "Shut up and search the place." They ransacked her apartment, tossing drawers open, overturning cushions, and scattering papers across the hardwood. One of them, a man with jittery hands, pulled a small plastic bag from his pocket and slipped it into her satchel. Laura's gaze followed the movement silently. She didn't react. She didn't need to. Every angle of the room was under surveillance. 3 hidden cameras she'd installed herself 2 years ago. Each one transmitted directly to an encrypted cloud server she controlled offsite. The officers found nothing substantial. Yet Callow smirked as he held up the planted bag. Well, look what we have here." Laura tilted her head. "You might want to check your timestamps before you celebrate." Her tone unnerved him. He shoved her toward the wall, cuffing her wrists. "You've got a smart mouth for a junkie." As they led her outside into the cold rain, she glanced at the nearest lamppost. There, faintly glimmering, was a small lens, her second backup camera, the one she'd placed for moments exactly like this. Inside the police van, she sat between 2 officers who whispered to each other, uneasy under her composure. Laura Bennett, 38, pale-haired, sharp-eyed, always in control. She'd built her life around understanding systems, dissecting them piece by piece until they had no secrets left. It was ironic, she thought, that tonight the system she'd devoted her career to was now dragging her through the mud. They didn't know her name yet, not the real one, not who she truly was. At the precinct, the air reeked of burnt coffee and cheap disinfectant. The officers paraded her past holding cells filled with weary faces. Behind the glass of an observation room, a few detectives watched as Callow filled out a report, fabricating every line with the precision of habit. Laura listened. Each lie was another nail in their coffin. When they finally processed her, the clerk looked up from the database screen, his expression changing instantly. "Sir, there's something wrong here." Callow frowned. "What now?" The clerk's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "She's not in the system as a civilian." "What the hell does that mean?" "She's listed as a federal agent. Department of Internal Affairs. Clearance level 7. The room froze. Laura lifted her gaze, calm and deliberate. "Now you understand," she said softly. "You just broke into the home of the person investigating you." Callow's jaw locked, but the color drained from his face. The other officers exchanged nervous glances. One of them muttered something about getting the captain. Laura leaned back in her chair, her wrists still cuffed but her posture regal. "Continue," she said. "I'm curious to see how deep this hole goes." Down the hall, in a cramped cubicle filled with humming monitors, Officer Mia Torres watched the body cam feed from the raid. Her brow furrowed. She'd seen hundreds of operations before, but this one was different. Chaotic, unprofessional, and too conveniently successful. She replayed a few seconds in slow motion. That's when she saw it. The moment a small plastic bag slipped from Callow's hand into Laura's purse. Mia's breath caught. Her stomach churned. She'd been in this department long enough to recognize corruption, But this was surgical. Someone wanted this woman destroyed. She minimized the video, copied the entire feed to an encrypted drive, and whispered to herself, "Not tonight." Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Laura waited patiently. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The wall clock ticked with cruel precision. She knew Mia would find the evidence. She'd seen her file, rookie, honest, observant. That was why Laura had chosen this department months ago. She'd needed someone on the inside who could still tell right from wrong. Callow returned with his captain, both men trying to mask the panic crawling up their throats. "Agent Bennett," the captain said stiffly. "We weren't aware. You weren't meant to be," Laura interrupted. "That's how corruption reveals itself. You should be proud. You've just confirmed everything I needed." She smiled faintly, not in triumph, but in quiet exhaustion. Outside, thunder rolled across Ravenbrook. Lightning flashed against the rain-slicked windows, and somewhere deep within the city's bureaucratic heart, a chain reaction had already begun. Data transfers, encrypted alerts, silent notifications climbing through federal servers. By the time dawn broke, every corrupt officer involved would already be under surveillance. Operation Glass Lantern had officially begun, and Laura Bennett, once their victim, was now the one holding the light. Morning crept into Ravenbrook through a veil of gray rain. The city seemed unaware that something monumental had shifted overnight. Inside the precinct, tension hung in the air like static before a storm. Detectives whispered in corners. Phones rang unanswered. And in the middle of it all, Agent Laura Bennett sat in a small conference room, calm and unreadable, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. Across from her, Captain Roy Denning's face glistened with stress. He was the kind of man who'd spent 25 years bending the law until it fit his comfort. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. This is all a misunderstanding, Agent Bennett. You understand how chaotic night raids can get." Laura set her cup down gently. "I understand procedure, Captain, and what I saw last night wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Someone planned it." He swallowed hard. "Are you accusing?" "I'm documenting," she interrupted. "Accusations come later." The captain looked at her with a mix of resentment and fear. He stood, mumbled something about clearing this up, and left. When the door closed, Laura exhaled slowly. Her wrists still carried faint red marks from the cuffs. The physical pain was trivial. The betrayal wasn't. Across town, Officer Mia Torres hadn't slept. The video footage she'd copied looped endlessly on her laptop screen. The evidence was irrefutable. Detective Callow had planted drugs. Twice. The timestamps matched Laura's claim perfectly. But Mia knew what came next: retaliation. Officers who spoke up didn't last long in Ravenbrook's 8th precinct. Still, she couldn't shake Laura's composure from her mind. The woman hadn't begged, hadn't protested. She had observed. It was like watching someone play chess while the board was on fire. Mia decided she wouldn't let fear dictate her silence this time. She inserted the encrypted drive into a federal upload system accessible only through back channels and began transmitting the files. As the upload progressed, a quiet alert pinged in Washington, D.C. in a secure division of the Department of Internal Affairs. The signal carried a name. Operation Glass Lantern Phase 2 initiated. Laura knew it wouldn't take long for her people to respond. She wasn't a field agent anymore. She was a strategist. Her role was to expose corruption not with weapons, but with patterns, patience, and proof. For 15 years, she'd built her cases meticulously, layer upon layer, until no denial could stand. But this was personal. The Ravenbrook operation had been a thorn in her side for 2 years. Reports of missing evidence, coerced confessions, falsified warrants. It all pointed to an organized network within the police department itself. When the precinct's door opened again, Mia stepped inside, her uniform slightly damp from the rain. "Agent Bennett?" she said quietly. Laura looked up, recognizing the face from her background briefings. "Officer Torres." "Sit down." Mia hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair. I saw what they did to you. I have the footage. Laura's eyes softened. Good. Keep it off precinct systems. They're compromised. I already uploaded it to the federal network, Mia whispered. Laura allowed herself a faint smile. Then you just finished my job for me. Outside, sirens wailed, unrelated but fitting. It was as if the city was responding to its own sickness. Mia leaned forward, her voice trembling. You knew this would happen, didn't you? You let them come to your door. Laura nodded. Corruption never shows itself unless it feels invincible. Last night, they proved exactly that. Mia stared. You could have been killed. I knew they'd hesitate. Men like Callow always do when the target looks calm. Her tone was dry, almost bitter. They confuse calm with weakness. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Then Laura asked softly, Why did you help me, Officer Torres? Mia blinked. Because I joined to protect people, not frame them. Somewhere along the way, everyone here forgot that. Laura nodded approvingly. Then remember it again. You'll need that conviction for what comes next. Across the hallway, Callow paced near his desk, rubbing the back of his neck. He'd just gotten a message from an unknown number. They know. Destroy everything. His breath quickened. He yanked open a filing cabinet, pulling out a stack of falsified warrants and shredding them. But digital traces couldn't be burned. The very network he thought he'd hidden behind was already being monitored by the Department of Justice's cyber unit. At 10:42 a.m., an encrypted message reached Laura's phone. GL2 confirmed. Stand by for warrant execution. Director E. Monroe. She pocketed the device, her voice steady. It's time. Mia frowned. Time for what? For accountability, Laura said simply. An hour later, the precinct's calm shattered. Unmarked black SUVs surrounded the building. Agents in navy jackets streamed in, badges flashing, weapons holstered but ready. A voice over the intercom ordered all personnel to stand down. In the confusion, Callow tried to slip out the back exit, only to be met by two federal marshals. His arrogance evaporated instantly. Laura and Mia stood side by side as the operation unfolded. You see, Laura said softly, truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to wait. Mia nodded, her throat tight. What happens now? Now? Laura replied, watching Callow being handcuffed. We clean house. Outside, the rain began to ease, the first sunlight breaking through the clouds. Ravenbrook's skyline shimmered faintly, as if the city itself was exhaling after years of holding its breath. But Laura knew this was only the beginning. Corruption didn't end with one arrest. It evolved like a virus adapting to survive. And she had no intention of letting it spread again. The morning after the raid, Ravenbrook was restless. News of the federal intervention spread like wildfire. Whispers turning to headlines, headlines to outrage. Corruption in the 8th Precinct exposed, blared across local stations. Commentators speculated, officers avoided cameras, and city officials scrambled to control the narrative. For the first time in years, people looked at their police not with trust, but with suspicion. Inside a secure federal holding facility, Detective Callow sat alone in an interrogation room, pale and hollow-eyed. He'd been stripped of his badge, his authority, his confidence. Across the mirrored glass, Agent Laura Bennett observed him silently, her posture straight, her face expressionless. She wasn't there for revenge. She was there for closure. When the door opened, Assistant Director Elijah Monroe stepped in. Tall, commanding, with a calm voice that carried authority, he nodded toward her. You built quite the case, Laura, he said. 2 years of undercover surveillance. 23 officers already in custody. You even got Denning. She didn't smile. It was never about numbers. It's about what they did to people who couldn't fight back. Monroe studied her a moment. You still take it personally. I should, she replied simply. Justice only means something when it costs you something to pursue it. Callow was brought in moments later. He looked older overnight, the weight of exposure pressing down on him. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You don't understand, Bennett. We were told to do it, orders from above. It wasn't just me. Laura folded her arms. Then start naming names. He hesitated. If I talk, I'm dead. You're already finished, she said. Talking is your only chance at relevance. The silence that followed was long, thick with fear. Callow finally lowered his gaze. There's a man, Deputy Commissioner Roland Price. He runs the contracts, the narcotics intel, everything. We were told to plant evidence on key suspects to protect bigger interests. Monroe exchanged a glance with Laura. They'd suspected Price for years but never had proof. Now they had a thread. Hours later, as storm clouds gathered again over Ravenbrook, Laura sat alone in her office reviewing files. Dozens of reports, photographs, wiretaps. Each name represented someone betrayed by the very people sworn to protect them. She scrolled through years of complaints ignored by Price's inner circle. Falsified warrants, hidden deaths, fabricated drug seizures. It wasn't just corruption, it was systemic decay. The door creaked. Officer Mia Torres entered quietly, holding a folder. These came from the city archives, she said. Financial records. You'll want to see them. Laura took the folder, scanning its contents. Wire transfers, offshore accounts, signatures. He was laundering through community housing projects, she muttered. The same ones his department promised to protect. Mia looked at her with quiet admiration. You really see everything, don't you? Laura's expression softened. Only because I learned to stop trusting what I'm told. That evening, Monroe called her into a briefing. The conference room was filled with agents, analysts, and lawyers. On the screen, Price's photograph glared down at them. Smiling, confident, untouchable. Monroe spoke firmly. Price has friends in high places. He's expecting us to hesitate. We won't. The evidence from Torres confirms his financial corruption. But we need airtight proof connecting him to the falsified raids. Laura, you're leading the field division on this. She didn't hesitate. I'll finish what I started. When the meeting adjourned, Mia caught up with her in the hallway. You know he'll come for you, she said. Laura's voice was steady. He already did. He just didn't finish the job. That night, Laura drove through the outskirts of the city, heading toward an abandoned warehouse once used as a police evidence storage site. According to Callow's confession, Price had used it to destroy sensitive files. The wind howled as she stepped inside, her flashlight cutting across the darkness. Dust motes swirled in the air like ghosts of forgotten truths. Near the back wall, she found it. A hidden cabinet, sealed but still humming faintly from a power source. She pried it open. Inside were hard drives, labeled with dates and case numbers. One folder caught her eye, Project Sentinel. She plugged in her portable reader and watched as lines of data filled the screen. Photos, financial logs, internal memos signed by Price himself. He hadn't just covered up crimes, he'd ordered them. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the distance. Laura switched off her light and crouched behind a crate. Shadows flickered near the doorway. Two men entered, armed and alert. They weren't officers, they were hired cleaners. Price's people. She waited until they passed her hiding spot, then moved silently toward the exit. Her car was parked half a block away. Every step felt heavier, every sound louder. When she finally reached the vehicle, she didn't look back. The drives on the seat beside her contained enough evidence to bring down half the department, and perhaps the city's leadership. Back at headquarters, Mia waited anxiously for her call. When the phone finally rang, Laura's voice came through, calm as ever. It's done, she said. But this goes deeper than we thought. Mia exhaled. How deep? Laura looked out at the dark city skyline. Deep enough that cleaning it might destroy everything around it. The first drops of rain began to fall again. Somewhere far away, Deputy Commissioner Price lifted a glass of whiskey and stared at his reflection. He had no idea the walls were already closing in. By the time dawn stretched its pale light over Ravenbrook, the story had spread beyond city limits. National outlets began covering it. An entire precinct under federal investigation, dozens suspended, a commissioner's name whispered in the halls of power. Yet in the middle of this storm, Deputy Commissioner Roland Price walked calmly through City Hall's marble corridors, smiling at reporters as though he had nothing to fear. His reputation had been built on charm, and for years it had hidden the rot beneath. In her dimly lit apartment, Laura Bennett watched the live broadcast. She had spent the night cataloging the data from the warehouse, files that read like a confession. Each document carried Price's authorization codes, each signature tying him to operations that ruined innocent lives. But even with the evidence, she knew bringing him down wouldn't be easy. People like Price didn't crumble. They detonated, taking everyone nearby with them. A soft knock came at her door. "Agent Bennett?" It was Mia Torres, looking exhausted but determined. Laura opened the door. "Come in. You shouldn't be here this early." "I couldn't sleep," Mia admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. The people we locked up because of Price's orders." Laura poured her a cup of coffee and handed it over. "That guilt you feel? Keep it. It's proof you still have a conscience." Mia looked down at her hands. "How do you live with this, knowing the system's broken?" Laura's voice softened. "By fixing one piece at a time." Moments later, her secure phone buzzed. Director Monroe's message was brief. "Meet at field office. We're moving forward. Today." When Laura arrived at the office, Monroe was waiting with 3 senior agents and a federal prosecutor. A large map of Ravenbrook covered the wall, red pins marking police stations, banks, and warehouses. Monroe pointed to one location near the harbor. "Price is meeting his financial liaison this afternoon. He'll be transferring final payments through shell accounts. We intercept that transfer, we have him on laundering, fraud, and obstruction. It ends there." Laura studied the map. "And if he realizes we're closing in? Then he'll run," Monroe said, "which makes our case stronger." By noon, Laura and Mia sat in an unmarked sedan across from a luxury restaurant overlooking the docks. Price's black car arrived exactly on time. He stepped out with his usual composure, suit pressed, gold watch gleaming. Inside, he greeted a portly man in a gray suit, his accountant Victor Lansing. From her earpiece, Laura heard Monroe's voice. "Wait until the transfer begins. Then move." Minutes passed. The tension was palpable. Finally, Lansing opened his briefcase, revealing stacks of paper and a sleek laptop. The transfer was live. Laura gave the signal. Now, federal vehicles surged in from every direction. Sirens blared, agents poured inside, and chaos erupted. Patrons screamed, glasses shattered, and Price's smirk faltered for the first time in years. Laura entered calmly amid the noise, badge in hand. "Roland Price," she said, "you're under arrest for corruption, conspiracy, and abuse of power." He chuckled bitterly. "You think this means anything? You'll be replaced before you even file the paperwork." "Maybe," she replied, "but at least you won't be around to see it." Price lunged toward the table, knocking the laptop to the ground in a desperate attempt to destroy it. Mia was faster. She slid across the floor, grabbed the device, and yanked out the power cable before it could auto-wipe. The agents restrained Price, his defiance cracking into fury. "You'll regret this," he spat. Laura leaned close enough that only he could hear. "I already did. 15 years ago, when I joined believing the badge meant justice." By evening, the federal building was buzzing. The evidence recovered from the arrest connected Price to everything. Laundered funds, false raids, silenced officers. The network was collapsing. Yet victory felt hollow. Laura sat at her desk long after everyone else left, scrolling through the case files. The numbers were staggering. Hundreds of falsified arrests. Families destroyed. Lives rewritten by lies. Mia entered quietly, holding a newspaper. The headline read, "Deputy Commissioner Arrested in Nationwide Corruption Probe." "You did it," she said. Laura shook her head. "We did it. But it's not over. Someone approved those budgets." Someone looked the other way. "You mean the mayor?" Laura didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside the window, the city glittered with false peace. For every corrupt officer removed, there was another waiting in the wings. But beneath her exhaustion, Laura felt something she hadn't in years: momentum. Mia placed a hand on her shoulder. You know, when I joined the force, I wanted to make a difference. Now I finally feel like I have. Laura gave a faint smile. That's how it starts. One honest person in a room full of liars can still change the outcome. A notification pinged on her screen. An anonymous, encrypted message. It contained a single line. You think you've cleaned house. You've only opened the first door. She read it twice, her expression tightening. The sender's address traced back to an internal government domain. Someone inside the federal network was watching. That night, Laura sat alone on her balcony as the wind brushed against her face. The rain had stopped, but thunder lingered on the horizon. She knew that truth had consequences. Exposing corruption didn't just free the innocent, it enraged the powerful. And the powerful had long memories. Still, as she stared into the city lights, she whispered to herself, "Let them come. I've already built the record." Because justice, she believed, wasn't about winning. It was about never giving up when the world told you to stop. The next morning, Ravenbrook looked deceptively calm. Streets bustled, news vans packed up, and the city's pulse seemed to return to normal. But beneath the polished surface, a quiet unease simmered. The arrest of Deputy Commissioner Price had shaken the power structure to its core. Judges delayed rulings. Officers called in sick. Reporters waited for the next name to drop. At the federal building, Agent Laura Bennett walked through the corridors with her usual precision, but her thoughts were far from settled. The message from the night before haunted her, an anonymous warning from inside the system she served. She'd faced corruption before, but never this deep. This was different. This wasn't about a few bad officers. It was about an institution protecting itself. In the briefing room, Director Elijah Monroe stood before a large digital board, lines connecting names and accounts like a spider's web. "We've started cross-referencing Price's communications," he said. Most of his messages were routed through encrypted channels tied to the mayor's office. "If we can prove collusion at that level, we'll expose the entire network." Laura nodded. "Then we go higher." Monroe's expression darkened. "Careful. The higher we climb, the thinner the air." Meanwhile, Officer Mia Torres sat in her patrol car outside the courthouse, scanning through reports. She'd been reassigned temporarily to Federal Witness Protection Detail, a move meant to keep her safe. But the looks from fellow officers told her she wasn't welcome anymore. Every day, another anonymous text. "Snitch. Traitor. You'll regret it." She ignored them, though sometimes the fear still crept in at night. Her only comfort was knowing Laura believed in her. That afternoon, Laura visited the detention wing where Price was being held. She found him seated calmly, hands clasped, an unsettling confidence still in his eyes. "You think this is over, Agent Bennett?" he said. "You think one arrest will change a system built on favors?" Laura met his stare without flinching. "You built your empire on silence. I built mine on evidence." He leaned forward. "And evidence can disappear. Files get corrupted. People get transferred. Accidents happen." She smiled faintly. "That's why I made copies." For the first time, his mask cracked. He realized she wasn't bluffing. When she left the room, she called Monroe immediately. "Price knows something," she said. "He's too calm. Someone's protecting him." Monroe sighed. "I was afraid of that. We've already had 2 data breaches since last night. Someone's trying to erase his trail from the inside." "Then we isolate the servers," Laura said. "Cut access to every department not cleared for federal security. That will create chaos," he warned. "Maybe chaos is what we need," she replied. By evening, the federal network was partially offline, communications rerouted through emergency protocols. Laura and a handful of trusted agents worked through the night, restoring files, copying data, tracing logins. Mia joined them, cross-checking timestamps. Hours passed in silence until Mia suddenly gasped. "I found something. Look at this IP address." It's registered under Monroe's division. Laura froze. That's impossible. She double-checked the entry, her heart tightening. The breach was coming from inside the leadership team itself. When Monroe returned the next morning, Laura confronted him directly. Director, we have a problem. Someone inside your department accessed classified evidence at 2:17 a.m. He frowned. Who? She hesitated. The credentials used were yours. Monroe's face drained of color. That's not possible. My system's on two-factor authentication. Then someone cloned your identity. His jaw tightened. You're saying I've got a mole. I'm saying we have one, she corrected. And whoever it is, they're close. At noon, the evidence grew more alarming. Surveillance footage from the server room showed a figure in a federal uniform, face obscured, entering Monroe's office after hours. The person plugged a device into his terminal and vanished. The logs confirmed data extractions, names of protected witnesses, including Mia's. When Laura saw that detail, her stomach dropped. They're going after Torres, she said. Monroe moved fast. Get her out. Now. But by the time Laura reached Mia's last known location, the patrol car was empty. Its doors open, engine running, radio crackling faintly with static. Rain began to fall, thin and cold. On the driver's seat lay a single folded note. You can't protect everyone. Her mind spun. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Someone inside the system had given them her location. She called Monroe, voice sharp. She's gone. He didn't ask how. He just said, then they've escalated. That night, Laura sat alone in her office, drenched from the rain, staring at the note. It wasn't just a threat, it was personal. Mia had risked everything to stand beside her, and now she'd been taken to silence the truth. For a long time, Laura said nothing. Then, finally, she whispered to herself, you wanted a war. Now you have one. She opened her encrypted terminal and activated an emergency directive labeled GL-5, Retaliatory Protocol. The system confirmed. Federal Counterintelligence Task Force authorized. Targets. Internal breach. Outside, lightning split the sky over Ravenbrook. The city below seemed to tremble as though sensing what was coming. Laura Bennett wiped her eyes, composed herself, and whispered, no more hiding. Justice, she realized, wasn't only about truth. It was about protecting those brave enough to reveal it. Ravenbrook's skyline glowed beneath a bruised sky, the rain tapering to a mist that clung to the glass of the federal building. Inside, tension pulsed through every corridor. Security checkpoints doubled overnight, servers were isolated, and agents whispered in low tones, glancing over their shoulders. No one trusted anyone anymore. The city's corruption case had begun as a single raid gone wrong, but now it was consuming everything. Agent Laura Bennett hadn't slept in 30 hours. Her desk was a battlefield of open case files, circuit boards, and encrypted drives. Across from her, Director Monroe stood grim-faced, his voice low. We traced the breach to a private terminal in District Command. Whoever's behind this had direct access to federal clearance. They knew exactly where to find Torres. Laura's hands tightened around a pen. If she's alive, we can still get her back. Monroe hesitated. That's what worries me. They're not holding her for ransom. They're using her as leverage. Leverage for what? To destroy you. A sharp knock interrupted them. An agent entered, holding a printed photo. Surveillance caught this near Dock 17. She's alive. Laura snatched the photo. Mia, blindfolded, bound, but breathing, sat in the back of a black van. A timestamp showed it had been taken an hour ago. Monroe didn't waste a second. We're mobilizing a rescue team. Laura shook her head. No, they'll expect that. If they took her because of me, then I go alone. Monroe's tone hardened. You're not walking into a trap. I built the trap, she said. I know how to dismantle it. Within an hour, she was driving through the industrial district, her car blending into the drizzle-soaked traffic. Her mind moved like a machine, every possibility calculated, every risk weighed. She had spent her life building cases against corruption, but this was the first time the system itself was fighting back. She parked near the docks, the air thick with the stench of salt and oil. The warehouses loomed silent, their windows glowing faintly under flickering lamps. Laura slipped inside through a side entrance, pistol drawn but held low. The sound of dripping water echoed like a ticking clock. In the far corner, a figure moved, a man she recognized instantly. "Roland Price," she said quietly. He smiled, the arrogance returned despite the cuffs he'd once worn. "You didn't think I'd stay locked up forever, did you? People like me don't vanish, we relocate." Laura's expression didn't change. "Where's Torres?" He gestured toward the shadows. "Safe for now. But you've made powerful enemies, Agent Bennett. The kind that don't lose gracefully." She raised her weapon slightly. "You think this ends with me?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "It ends when the public stops believing you. You've made noise, yes, but institutions survive scandals. You'll just be another burned name in a classified report." Laura lowered the gun. "You talk too much." Before he could react, a voice echoed from behind him, weak but defiant. "Laura!" Mia, bound to a chair, pale but conscious. Relief flashed through Laura's chest. She took one step forward, then froze as Price's men emerged from the shadows, four of them, guns drawn. "You're predictable," Price sneered. "Always walking straight into fire because you think justice will protect you." Laura's voice was calm. "It does. Eventually." Suddenly, the overhead lights flared. A thunderous bang followed, the warehouse doors bursting open as a flood of federal agents stormed in. Monroe's voice roared over a loudspeaker. "Drop your weapons! Federal task force!" Price spun in disbelief. "You!" Laura interrupted. "You really thought I'd come here alone?" The firefight lasted less than a minute. When it ended, Price lay handcuffed on the ground again, his empire finally shattered. Mia was freed, shaken but alive. As medics tended to her, she gripped Laura's hand weakly. "You knew they'd follow you." Laura nodded. "Truth always draws out the liars." By dawn, the docks were cordoned off, helicopters circling overhead. Price and his men were transferred to federal custody under maximum security. Monroe approached Laura quietly. "It's over," he said. "No," she replied. "It's exposed. That's different." Later that day, Laura stood before a congressional committee in Washington. The hearing room buzzed with reporters, cameras flashing as she took her oath. Her testimony was precise, unwavering. She described the falsified raids, the planted evidence, the cover-ups, and the network of officials who had protected them. When she finished, the room fell silent. For a moment, even the politicians seemed human. A week later, indictments swept through Ravenbrook. Mayors, judges, corporate donors. The headlines called it the Lantern Purge. Citizens flooded the streets in support, holding candles as a symbol of light-piercing corruption. For the first time, the city didn't just react, it believed. That evening, Laura visited Mia in the hospital. The younger officer sat by the window, for tubes running to her arm but her spirit unbroken. "You look terrible," Mia joked softly. Laura smiled faintly. "You should see the other side." Mia's eyes filled with gratitude. "You didn't give up on me." Laura shook her head. "You didn't give up on the truth. That's rarer." As she left the room, the hallway lights dimmed slightly, reflecting against the polished floors. Laura paused, looking at her reflection. The lines on her face spoke of years spent fighting a battle most people never saw. Yet beneath the fatigue, there was calm, purpose. Outside, the night was clear for the first time in weeks. The city lights shimmered against the water, no longer a reflection of corruption but of renewal. Monroe's voice echoed in her mind from days earlier. "The higher we climb, the thinner the air." He was right, she thought, but it was also where the stars were brightest. As she walked into the cool night, her phone buzzed. An unknown number, a single message. "The lantern still burns. Keep it alive." She looked up at the skyline and whispered to herself, "Always." For Laura Bennett, justice was never about punishment. It was about faith that even in a broken system, there were still people willing to fight for what was right. And though the battle was far from over, for the first time, the city of Ravenbrook could finally breathe.